If it's tough for you to hear, close to the river, make your way a little closer. So again, good evening, and what a tremendous turnout for this very special occasion. Some of our dignitaries want to make their way to the primo seats. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Irvine. I'm a graduate, class of 1983. Thank you. And a proud parent of a 2011 graduate. I'm the director of admissions here at St. Peter's, obviously, and I'm very honored to host this great event. It's a fitting opportunity for us to recognize, appreciate, and most importantly, honor Jim Horan's 51-year career. He's making his grand entrance as we speak. When we think of Jim, we think outstanding teacher, loving husband, prep historian, gifted. Sorry, Jim, I can't make out your writing on that last word. With Jim being so passionate about journalism, I really wanted to start the night with interesting facts from newspapers published around the time he started working at Prep. So I packed up my bag and went to the library, the branch over on Jersey Avenue, but the librarian wouldn't let me see them. She said I didn't have those white cloth gloves needed to handle such ancient documents. But while I was there, I did take a look at a map of this area that was displayed under glass. It showed downtown at the time Jim was hired. And I was amazed to learn that when Jim began at Prep, most of this Paulus Hook area was dense forest. I kid because I love. Yeah. I don't want to turn this into a roast. That's why Paul Schaetzle is here. So at this time, I'd like to call up Dr. Michael Gomez, our president, to start us with a prayer.
Tradition, gratitude, hope. Then, now, always. What better way to start a celebration of Jim Horan than with those words? Let's pray. We pray for the then. We pray with so much gratitude for Jim, his work, his dedication, his time, his impact, his genuine self. We pray for the many pages he has literally written metaphorically for us, for Prep. And most of all, we pray in gratitude for his love of all things Prep. We pray for the now, in gratitude for all of you, all of us that we call St. Peter's Prep. Tonight we celebrate Jim, but we also celebrate this 153-year-old Jesuit project of building men for and with others. And I don't think Jim would want it any other way. And we pray for the always. In this case, for Jim and Pat and family, that their road may be filled with hope and peace, with great music, and great stories yet to be written. God of all callings and seasons and journeys, please bless our brother Jim. Let him carry, let him embrace, let him walk with the memory of his work and legacy here at 144 Grant Street with enduring joy and God's grace. St. Ignatius, St. Peter. Thank you.
Before going further, we want to thank the committee that helped organize this celebration: Tris Fitzpatrick, Kate Lillis Magnus, Anthony Keating, Mike Duran, Sarah Laz, and especially Rebecca Rausch, Prep's Director of Special Events. We must also acknowledge Prep's operations staff who helped get everything set up for us. They always go above and beyond. So that you know, our format for tonight, so you can plan your trips to the bar, food, bathroom breaks, will be as followed. We'll have our first two speakers in about 10 minutes, and then we'll take about a 30-minute break before our final two speakers. Okay, so we'll return in about 10 minutes, so settle in. Okay, folks, as we begin again, if I could just have your attention. There are so many people who could have been asked to provide comments at this event. So choosing the speakers was indeed a challenge. But those speaking this evening have something uniquely in common. Namely, they have known and worked with Jim very closely for at least 4 decades. And like Jim, have each been humbly inducted as a Legend of Prep, the school's highest honor. Their professional and personal connections with Jim are among the deepest within his seemingly endless collection of Prep friends and colleagues. And I'm happy to count myself among that group. And honestly, what can any of us say about Jim's career at Prep that he isn't going to include in his own speech? Our first speaker is Jack Caulfield from the class of 1971. Crowd favorite. As is the case with Paul, Jack and Jim became friends and colleagues in the 1980s through Jack's attendance at various Prep events, often with his dad, Edmund, class of 1937. Jim invited both Jack and Edmund to join the alumni board, and over the decades, Jack and Jim overlapped often when working on various institutional initiatives, especially our capital campaigns. This relationship grew even stronger when Jack joined the Board of Trustees and then served as its chair. Not surprisingly, Jim and Jack remain each other's confidants and sounding boards on numerous issues regarding St. Peter's and life away from Prep. Jack Caulfield.
Thank you, John. Good evening. I'm truly grateful to be one of the speakers at tonight's reception honoring our friend and colleague, Jim Horan. His 51-year career has been marked by advancing Prep's mission while helping maintain the traditions of this special institution, a delicate balancing act which he has performed admirably. A little background. My association with Jim, as John said, is linked to several of his many roles here at Grandin Warren. As a donor, a lot of us were, who gladly took Jim's calls, soliciting me for gifts over the years. As a fellow member of Prep's alumni board, as a colleague who assisted Jim as alumni chair of Prep's annual fund, as a teammate on several board committees, finance, advancement, and master planning, and as a peer on Prep's leadership team, me as CFO, and Jim as VP for Planning and Principal Giving. Before I get into my reflections on Jim's career accomplishments, I feel I need to cover a few of his unique personality traits and memorable moments here at Prep. Let's get them out on the table right now before Schaetzle brought them up. Jim is a picky eater. In fact, he admits that he has the dietary habits of a 12-year-old. One of my favorite stories involves Jim's visit a few years ago to Jerry Sheehan's home, along with other prep staff and a busload of Sheehan scholars. The meal served was seafood heavy. No chicken parm, no pizza, no steak, no hamburger. Needless to say, Jim fasted that day until the return trip to prep, when the bus pulled into a rest stop on US 95 and Jim filled up on sweet and salty snacks. His Legends acceptance speech. For those of you who missed it, it was very long. So long that before he finished, the bar closed and a complimentary continental breakfast was being served. Jim is at heart an editor. I learned early on in our relationship not to get offended after we reviewed a document I prepared. He wielded a red pen like Errol Flynn brandished a sword in The Adventures of Robin Hood. Now that we've covered those issues, let's address Jim's impact on prep as seen through my eyes. Just think about the critical roles he's played over the course of his career. John mentioned the formation of the Alumni Board, which increased alumni involvement and created awards that honor those members of the prep family who had a transformational impact on the life of the school or who achieved a remarkable athletic success in their career at prep or in their professional careers following graduation. As a fundraiser, Jim oversaw the creation and development of an advancement juggernaut that produced record annual fund results year after year. It also successfully completed 4 capital campaigns that transformed the prep campus and grew our endowment to historic levels, funding need-based financial aid to hundreds of prep students. And he helped coordinate with Bob Reiser, Ken Bowler, and Michael Gomez the establishment and development of the Sheehan Scholarship Program that provided full tuition merit-based scholarships to almost 300 students in the last 13 years. Throughout my years as board chair and then as CFO, Jim was an integral member of the finance subcommittee, playing a key role in ensuring the short and long-term fiscal strength of the prep. His department's achievements allowed us to balance budgets, improve academic, athletic, and extracurricular programs, and hire and retain talented and dedicated faculty and staff. His creation of fundraising reports and projections were crucial in planning and achieving the school's operational success and financial stability. Prep's presidents and CFOs relied on Jim's schedules and analysis to make the appropriate financial decisions. But it is as VP of Planning and Major Gifts where Jim has had the greatest impact. During his tenure, the campus advanced into the 21st century. Consider these major projects that were completed with Jim's active involvement: the Sipperstein Library, the Warren Street Plaza, Keenan Field, the Moriarty Science Center, the refurbishment of Mulry and Hogan Halls, the construction of the Perkins Athletic Center, and the rehabilitation of the freshman building. Changing the face of prep was vital in improved enrollment, better student experiences, and enhanced spaces for program delivery and faculty and staff workplaces. I feel blessed to count Jim among my closest friends and prep associates. His dedication and professional skills, along with his kindness to all in the St. Peter's family, has been a hallmark of his vocation. I thought I would close with the words that marked the end of the introduction delivered by my late brother-in-law, Bill Ahern, at the presentation of Jim's Legends Award in 2009. Bill summarized Jim's impact far better than I could, and here's what Bill said. A wearer of many hats, a visionary, he had a constant over decades of dramatic change. Jim provides a daily reminder of what is good about St. Peter's, what endures, what inspires, and what the institution can still become. That's a lot to ask of one man, but this is the stuff of legends. Congratulations, my friend, on a remarkable career, and best wishes to you and Pat on a well-deserved retirement. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Jack. Our next speaker is Paul Schaetzle, also from the class of 1971. There you go. Jim got to know Paul in the 1970s through Paul's attendance at almost every prep event. And then Jim invited him to join the alumni board in the early 1990s. As Jim became increasingly involved in campus planning and the execution of our capital projects, Paul became an invaluable colleague for both him and for Prep in general, highlighted by his many years as a member of the Board of Trustees, and in particular, his role as chair of the Board Master Planning Committee, of which Jim was also a member. This summer, he returns to Prep's Board of Trustees to begin his 5th three-year term. Paul Schaetzle.
Well, good evening, everyone. If you could bear with me for 1 second, rather than reinvent the wheel, just hold on for a minute. I'm going to recite Jim's acceptance speech from the Legends of 2009. In January 1965, I began studying for the Archdiocesan entrance exam. Excuse me. Yes, Steve. No, I just started. Really? All right, we'll take care of it. That was Mayor Fulop. The city has a midnight curfew. So we're gonna have to go with Plan B. But first of all, I'd like to welcome, besides Jim, who's obviously the guest of honor, his wife Pat, his brothers Brian and Gary, his brother-in-laws Steve and Donald. So welcome. Actually, a few years ago, when one of my insurance details, I was doing an inspection at Trinitas Hospital. And Gary, as you know, was an administrator there for many years, retired. I pull into the parking lot, I get out. There's this gigantic 20-foot high signage saying Gary S. Horan Emergency Pavilion. So I've told Jim, I said, for a modest 7-figure donation, we will gladly change out the G in Hogan Hall to an R. So he hasn't bid yet, but I'm hoping he does. But seriously, I like to bring back some memories to a lot of people here. I'm sure 90% of the people were at the last Legends dinner. And we remember Father Tony Azzardo. I'd like to borrow something that he said. He said, look around. Just take 20 seconds, look around. You all are a sacrament from God, a gift from God. But I ask you also tonight to look around. Look behind you at the Freshman Humanities Science English building, depending on what year you're here. Or as Dr. Gomez calls it, the crown jewel of downtown Jersey City. The refurbished Moriarty Science Center behind me, Mulberry and Hogan Hall here, the very plaza that you're sitting on. All of these are gifts from God, including that robot that's going through. But with the possible exception of the robot, all of those things I just mentioned were accomplished through the handiwork of God's faithful servant and our prep brother, Jim Horan. During his storied career here, Jim has worn many hats: teacher, Office of Public Information, school spokesperson, master planner, fundraiser, shakedown artist. But many of you probably know that I have a long association with the fire department in Jersey City. A couple weeks ago, I was visiting one of the firehouses, Engine 17, and the captain was a graduate, class of 1994. And whenever two prep men get together, after 30 seconds, their talk turns to Grand and Warren. So, of course, we started talking about what's going on at prep. Tonight's event came up, and he said, Jim Horan, great teacher. Now think about that for a while. Any teacher that's on top of his or her game is lucky enough to get their application on the desk of then Father Markey, or now Mr. Caulfield, really is top shelf. And here's someone, a student, 31 years later, describes Jim as great teacher. So of all those other accolades, I can't think of nothing more fitting than to remember Jim as great teacher. So Jim, ave atque vale. There'll be an opportunity to get autographs on his Legends book, and the Prep History book is at the 50% discount tonight at the bookstore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. At this time, I would like to call up our principal, Chris Caulfield, from the class of 2003. Chris and Jim have bonded over the years by their mutual love of all things track and field. And Chris has a special gift he'd like to present to Jim.
Thank you, everyone, and good evening. It's a pleasure to be up here and present Jim with a gift from a part of the prep community that he has loved for so long. I'm not referring to the Lisbon Pizza or Flamingo Diner. Jim outlasted both, of course. Rather, I'm referring to the prep cross-country and track programs. As many of you know, Jim was a great runner for prep, Marquette, and even in the road running circuit. His knowledge and talent always made me see him as a mentor in all things running. Through the work of Trish Fitzpatrick, the team was able to put something together for Jim to recognize his countless contributions to the program and, of course, to prep. As a coach for many years, I can say that I spent many a time in Jim's office or in the hallway talking about the most recent times our guys ran or to confirm whether or not a record was broken. Jim's face would always light up when he heard a miler maybe broke 4:20 or even 4:10 in most recent years, but he was equally invested when the likes of Najee Glass or another one of our famed sprinters, throwers, or jumpers completed a PR, personal record. I certainly will cherish the memories of those talks that would often go way longer than just your average water cooler discussion, because we both obviously shared a great passion for the sport and for prep. So I'd ask Jim to come up and accept this token of our appreciation for his dedication to the prep cross country and track programs. And I'll make sure to continue to send text updates and performances long after you clean out your office, Jim. Congratulations. Thanks a lot. A few things. Baby, open that one up. Yeah, that's good. Congrats.
Many relay teams. Thank you.
Excellent. At this time, we're going to take a break of about 30 minutes before we have our final speaker, and then the man of the hour will take the microphone. So eat, relax, have a drink. We'd like to continue with tonight's program. I just asked the folks in the rec yard, if you can't hear us too clearly, doesn't really matter if you can't hear me, but you definitely going to come forward to hear Jim, and maybe Jack, but definitely Jim. And before I introduce our final speakers, Paul Schaetzle was able to pull a couple strings, and the city has waived the time curfew for this event, so you will be able to hear Jack's and Jim's speeches in their entirety. Jim is always quick to refer to the class of '79 as one of his favorites to have taught. and Jack is one of his all-time favorite students. As student and teacher, they were in sync from day one and became close colleagues when Jack arrived back at Prep as a faculty member. Naturally, the bond strengthened during Jack's years as Prep's principal, joining Jim as one of Prep's senior administrators. Especially noteworthy was their work together in the mid-1990s on the renovation of the English building during the Keys to the Future capital campaign. That friendship never wavered after Jack's departure from Prep in 2003. Jack is currently finishing his 16th year as president of Xavier High School, our fellow Jesuit school right across the river. Jack Raslowsky.
Thank you, John. When Tony Keating is the only one who laughs at your jokes about how long I go, you're in trouble. Because Tony will laugh at just about anything. And if you remember Jim Horan actually saying I was one of his favorite students, a man who, never drinks, must have been drunk that day, too. But I appreciate the compliment. 2 notes as I begin. 1, the great presence of the class of '79 there, who certainly deserve their own applause. And I couldn't help but think of the day Tom McGinty called me and Jim Keenan and said, we're closing the street. Joe Cooney, Tom Lean, and I took care of it, and I need a check for $200,000. And here we are, enjoying the benefits, the many benefits of Tom and Joe and Tom's work. It really is a delight to speak tonight for a few minutes about Jim. When I arrived at Grandin Warren as a freshman in 1975, Jim Horan had the first of his 51 years under his belt. The Jim Horan I encountered in the freshman building was young, fit, good-looking, cool in his own centered, self-confident way. Now, the mid to late 70s were the end of certain eras at Prep. We had, for example, some cool teachers, or so they thought, who would still bounce the occasional student off the wall, or sometimes multiple walls from the freshman building on the way to the prefect's office, or up in the desk with a student in it with a swift kick. That was not Jim. Jim was on the other end of the cool spectrum. Good hair, and great beard, wonderful smile. The 2-seater car, a Mazda RX-7, if I'm remembering correctly, that got here a little later than we did as freshmen, but arrived while we were students. And not only did he have the car, he got the girl, too. In class, he was prepared, erudite, I looked that up today, interesting. He got to read and do cool things. And this was a very different world in the 70s. While Prep then and Prep now is a great place, the neighborhood and the city were in flux. My brother Kirk, who was a freshman when we were seniors, crossing the street from then Burke Hall, now Moriarty, going to the gym for freshman basketball practice with Jeff Favia, was mugged. This was not uncommon in Jersey City in the day. Generally, it wasn't a bad thing, unless it was. Some kids threatened to beat you up, tell you to give them the money, and usually they left without beating you up. Usually. Someone in the gym felt it would be a good idea to call the police. So my brother and my father spent a few hours in a Jersey City cruiser in downtown Jersey City searching for the perpetrators. They found them. God knows what happened to them. I did tell Kirk if he crossed the street a little earlier, he would have been just fine, because Ben Dineen's JV would have been running around the block and they would have saved him, but he didn't get it. But I raise that only because there were people here then, cool guys, and maybe a few gals like Jim, or Randy, Lorenzo, Anna Garcia, Rich Kennedy. They were here with other stalwarts Lizardo, Brownie, Rooney, McGinnis, Howard, Casey. A few folks who some might describe as crazy in their own way. Mike Gray, Charlie Carey, others. They carried us through the lean years. It's easy to forget those days. It's easy to forget classes of 150, 160, 170. It's easy to forget total enrollments in the high 600s. It's easy to forget Hudson Catholic in every way imaginable kicking our ass. Enrollment, quality of curriculum, other things. People had to get us through. And it was the young guys and others who got us through. And Joe Parks arrived, and Jerry Bellotti arrived, and Rich Hansen arrived, and Jack Campion arrived, and Bea and Fran arrived, and others arrived to help us along the way. But Jim and those guys were here. And we would not be here, and we would not be who we are without Jim and his compatriots doing what they did in the 70s and 80s. Everything else wouldn't have happened. One of the other things that was different was the curriculum piece of the puzzle. It's fair to say electives and choice were not in great abundance at St. Peter's Prep in those days. But when you got to senior year, there were options. Communications, journalism, a few other things, taught by that cool guy. Let me draw from two dear friends and classmates who said it better than I could. Tom Moriello, who flew across the country to be here, writes, "Communications taught by Jim Horan is one of the great classes at Prep, but it was also something different. The field of media studies was more modern and cutting edge, and Jim's class was a tour de force history of the development of media, particularly television in the second half of the 20th century. We looked at Edward R. Murrow, Newton Minow, Joe McCarthy, the Kennedy-Nixon debates, the expanding universe of television channels, the growth of the FCC, and countless other players and events. It was really a course not just about media, but about American political and cultural history. And Jim taught it with a passion and energy that were irresistible. We are fortunate to have had Jim so perceptibly guide us through the landscape of America." Tony Petrosino, another classmate of ours, who would have been here, but is in Helsinki giving his own address tonight, brought an intellectual curiosity, and he writes, "Jim brought an intellectual curiosity and cultural awareness to his class that was contagious. His class introduced me to ideas and perspectives that I, as a kid from Hoboken, had never encountered before." Tony continued, "Mr. Horan helped us explore how TV both reflected and shaped America, from the frenzy of Beatlemania and the unrest of Vietnam to the shootings at Kent State, the unraveling of trust during Watergate, and the rise of cultural commentary through shows like All in the Family. He challenged us to think about why a silly show like Gilligan's Island endured, and what made the campy chaos of Batman stand out in the Cold War years." Let me tell you, Petro paid a hell of a lot more attention in that class than I did. Tony continued, "And he gave space to powerful cultural moments, like the broadcast of Alex Haley's Roots, which stopped the nation in its tracks and opened conversations about race in history that many of us were not having anywhere else." Noting the many things Jim has done at Grand and Warren, Tony concludes, "But for me, he will always be a teacher first. One who played a critical role in helping me to understand that my interests were valid, worthy of study, and potentially even the foundations for life's work." He concludes, "For that, I will always be grateful." Tube of Plenty, Plug and Drug, WSPP. I could arguably go on a lot about WSPP and probably should, the regular news show produced in Communications. Let it suffice to say that Cronkite and Brokaw had nothing on us. Our dear departed classmate Jim Haig, who followed Jim Horan to Marquette 9 years after Jim departed from New Jersey, spoke about Jim's classes shaping his life and work. Jim D'Angelo, whose own work shaped this institution for good for almost 3 decades, had a Horan trifecta: English 2, journalism, and communications. D'Angelo recalls Jim's love of good writing, particularly Anna Quinlan and her About New York column, and one column in particular about a late-night visit to a Greenwich Village animal hospital. D'Angelo swears that's hanging somewhere in the Horan residence. He spoke about Jim's encyclopedic knowledge of the New York Times, reporters and columnists, his tales of Tippy's Charcoal Haven in the Heights, I miss Tippy's, Egan's too, and his love of the dash. I've always attributed my love of the blue flare pen to Tony Azzardo, but until Jim mentioned this, I never realized my affection for the dash started with Jim Horan. His appreciation of good writing fostered good writing among hundreds and hundreds of students here. Jim's teaching, writes Jim, is an ongoing tribute to his good work over the years. Jim need not be idolized or enlarged in his retirement beyond what he was over the last 51 years. He should be celebrated as a good and decent man, a man who has been loyal to the institution and every person he has served for 51 years. A man committed to his students, committed to building a stronger St. Peter's Prep, committed to his colleagues, a man modeling honesty, faith, loyalty, faithfulness, and respect. Jim never asked for anything of us that he did not bring with him in spades. Then, now, always, Jim has been the best of St. Peter's Prep. A prayer often attributed to Pedro Arrupe closes with the words, "Fall in love, stay in love, and that will make all the difference." In 1966, arriving as a freshman from Weehawken, Jim started to fall in love with St. Peter's Prep. He fell in love, he stayed in love, and that has made all the difference. Thank you, Jim, for the ways you have loved us and have loved this place. The gifts you have given, we shall never forget.
Always tough to follow Jack, but I do have a few words of my own. William Dawes, D-A-W-E-S. Does that ring a bell to anyone? See the wheels turning out there? Jim is running through the Rolodex in his head. He's one of 8 people in the world who still use the term Rolodex. Dawes, wasn't he a scholastic? Taught Latin in the 60s? I think he was a JV coach in 75. Maybe he's one of Jim's former students. The name William Dawes most likely means nothing to you. 250 years ago, Dawes did something pretty important. He headed south around midnight while his friend Paul Revere went north and west. History has not been as kind to William as it has been to Paul. In his book, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell says the difference was that Paul Revere was a connector. He was a businessman, he was active in a Masonic lodge, active in several local social clubs, and a frequenter of the pubs. He knew exactly who to tell along the route, and they knew him. So when he said, "Spread the word, the British are coming," they did just that. For decades, Jim Horan has been the connector at Prep. An alumnus calling for a classmate's contact info, someone trying to start an endowed scholarship, classmates planning a reunion, have a grandson applying to Prep. Are there any Prep connections with this company? You get the idea. Jim has been that one person they all knew they could call, visit, email, or text, and they knew they would be welcomed in person or they'd get a quick reply. They relied on Jim for information, guidance, or the answer to any Prep question. He's helped students get into Prep, then into college, then helped them land their first job, and then did it all over again for their son, and then grandson and great-grandson. Jim has cultivated relationships which have multiplied into hundreds, probably thousands. Others will talk of his institutional knowledge, which is beyond compare. But it's the personal connection to Prep that Prep has been for so many and for so long that will be missed the most. Unlike William Dawes, and much more like Paul Revere, Jim's name will forever be remembered as part of Prep's glorious history. For me personally, Jim's departure will leave a void. Our journey has gone from Jim as my teacher to my colleague, then mentor, boss, and friend. Of those, Jim has always remained the teacher. He loves sharing his knowledge of Prep's history, or classic rock, or the early days of the NBA, or some random Olympian's time in the 400, or the best scene in Apocalypse Now. He loves imparting wisdom gathered from vast experience, and he absolutely still loves to write, to edit, and to be challenged with a grammatical or punctuation question. People speak of the face or the voice of a place. Well, Jim has been and may always be the written word of Prep. So on behalf of more folks than I could ever count, thank you, my teacher and my friend. At this time, it's my great honor to introduce Jim, obviously the reason we're all here. And just one last shot, I can't pass it up. When Jim finishes, the caterers will have the omelet stations ready.
Well, I didn't take this at Marquette. There you go. Good evening. I do have prepared remarks, of course, but just from the heart, this has been quite a few months leading up to this event. Getting bombarded, in the very best sense of that word, with emails, phone calls, text messages, visits about my impending retirement. And it's been wonderful, been a little melancholy, but it's also given me an opportunity to step back from the rat race, take a breath, and think of my career here and think of what this school has done for me. And I can say from the bottom of my heart that my efforts over the years here, have been to some degree my paying back for the 4 years I was here. I didn't know that I could be a really great student in college until I got through Prep, pounding that into me. I didn't know that I could have an influence on a place like this before Prep and the Jesuits taught me that we can all have an impact, and indeed that we should. So as I segue into some prepared remarks here, I just want to mention that and thank you. As I pan here and I look at you, this is a scene I will never forget for the rest of my life. And thank you. There are students here from my first couple of years of teaching. There are faculty members from many years ago, just tremendous. So thank you. Starting a couple of prepared remarks here. For the last few weeks, actually the last few months, my colleagues were referring to this event as Jim Fest. But I bet there's a few people lurking out there that are referring to this as Prep's Independence Day. But without those messy tariffs. Either way, it's a great party on a beautiful night, and I'm truly overwhelmed by the turnout. By the way, you've seen the coasters, and one side has the guy that Patricia in 1976 married, and the other side is the guy she endures on a daily basis now. So, thank you, Pat. Some years ago, I attended an event at a local university where one of our trustees was being honored. And after about the fourth or fifth person came up to the microphone and gave, all these great comments and stories and talked about the resume and the impact, the woman sitting next to me, whom I knew, leaned over and said, "They gave everything but the viewing hours." And I just hope that none of you are thinking about that right now. Also, I want to thank the fellows that spoke earlier. I did consider them my closest friends till I heard some of their remarks. And they've now been reduced to acquaintances. And they're on double secret probation. Obviously, this last year especially has been one of reflection, as I mentioned to you. And I always think of a book that came out in 1978, a profound book called Chance and Circumstance. And it was an examination of the draft during the Vietnam War and the fairness or unfairness of deferments to that draft. Now, of course, that content, that topic of the book has nothing to do at all with my being here tonight or my career at Prep. But it does have something, the title of the book has a lot to do, because I've adopted that phrase, chance and circumstance, to explain in 3 words the way I look back at my career at Grandin Warren. In essence, beginning with my being hired in August of '74, I've often found myself being at the right place at the right time when opportunities arose. And in hindsight, I think I've been the epitome of that slogan, "It's better to be lucky than good." Yes, I've been at Prep a long time, underscored just 2 months ago when I attended my own 55th reunion right here at Prep. That same reunion night, there were many other classes celebrating their reunion, the years ending in 0 and 5. So one of the classes, I stopped in to see virtually all those classes because I had taught a lot of those guys years ago. But the one class I was really looking to visit was the class of 1975. When I started here, fresh out of college with very little training, I had 115 seniors in 5 sections of the communications section elective that Jack spoke about. So a lot of these guys I haven't seen since 1975. So I went over to see them. I was warmly greeted. I recognized a lot of them. And then it struck me, these guys are 67 years old. How did they get so old? And how did I get so old? Even older. And they would come up to me and say, "Hey, Mr. H, I can't believe you're still here." And to this day, I don't know if they were talking about my tenure at Prep or my tenure on this planet. And when I think about these significant relationships I've had in my life, the second longest one is myself in St. Peter's Prep, starting with my freshman year in 1966. And it's second only to my relationship with the Horan family when I came into this planet, into this earth in 1952. Even with these long connections, the Prep connection is longer than my connection with my wife, whom many of you know the story. We met over in that building right there, the Prep Gym, in the fall of 1968 at a dance. Just to put it into context, that was the year before Woodstock or the moon landing. So we've been a couple since then. And as I think back, my first classroom was right around the corner, Hogan 105. At 3 o'clock every day, that was transformed into the jug room, the detention room for you non-prep folks here. And I always thought that prep knew something about me, that they put me in the detention room as my first classroom. Over the years, I've heard people meet me for the first time and say, "Boy, I heard you've had the same job for 5 decades." They say it with amazement, but also with pity. And so I've become fairly adept at saying, well, no, I've had the same employer for 5 decades, but actually I've had very different jobs. And I think, based on what you heard previously, in and out of the classroom, different administrative jobs, different parts of the school. And while I take very seriously and with great appreciation the impact I may have had, a lot of it had to do with, again, right place, right time. Even a lot of the credit I get for the renovation of this campus, people that I went to prep with, when I think back to the late 60s when I was a classmate, saying, "Is that the same Jim Horan that was on the track team running around, etc.? He's the one that's helping develop the prep campus. Didn't he go to journalism school? I didn't know he was an architect." No. My wife would attest to that. I barely know which side of a hammer to use. But so many things pushed the project along. And one of the things when I look around from this point of view with the skyline, that's the New Jersey skyline, by the way, with the skyscrapers, not the New York skyline right here. Prep could not have grown its campus the way it did if it wasn't for what was happening along the entire waterfront. You're all aware of that story starting in Hoboken in the 1980s. So in that case, not only was I the right person at the right time, but so was Prep. And back in the 70s, there was serious talk at one point of what kind of school Prep would become because people from out of town wouldn't send their students here. But we stuck it out during the tough times, and now we're obviously benefiting from the great times. I just have to mention a few people, if you bear with me. I and Prep stand on the shoulders of so many people that came before us. Their names are on some buildings, on plaques around the school, and in my own life, during my student days, I had 5 or 6 teachers that became legends of Prep, literally, and they were master teachers. Jack Casey, Clem O'Sullivan, Lou Parisi, Charlie Rooney. And along the way, there were towering Jesuits, such as Joe Parks, Earl Markey, Jim Keenan, and of course, Tony Azzardo. 4 men who will always be on my personal Jesuit Mount Rushmore. And there were faculty colleagues like Rich Kennedy, Mike Gray, Carl DiLorenzo, Rich DiClementi, who showed me the ropes in my first year of teaching, especially guiding me through that crucible that every first-year teacher endures. In the mid-1980s, I started working in the development office, or with the development office, on projects regarding fundraising and alumni relations with Jerry Bellotti and Liz Walsh. And at that time, I started to connect with the giants of the alumni base. These are graduates a decade or 2 earlier than myself that I just revered about their legacy at Prep. Names that you may know: Ken Kunzman, Larry Fell, Tom Sullivan, Kevin Collins, Joe Braddock, Ray Olmack. And I will always be indebted, as I've mentioned at microphones for years, to colleagues of mine in the Office of Public Information at Prep, our first administrative office that dealt with student recruitment and PR. That's Dan Sorrenti, class of 76, who was my top student out of 115 students in 1976, and Rosemary Flood, who came to Prep fresh out of the graduate program at Fordham University. And in that period with first Dan and then with Rosemary, things came out of that office, things like Prep Magazine, the Freshman for a Day program, the vast increase in what we do with the open houses, home recruiting receptions. Again, chance and circumstance, right place at the right time. As an employee of Prep for 51 years, I've signed 51 one-year contracts, kind of like Tommy Lasorda. And for my bosses, I've had 9 presidents, 8 of whom were Jesuits. Jesuit priests. That makes me kind of unique. Think about it. I've had 8 bosses who could consecrate a host at a Mass, baptize people, hear confessions, absolve sins, and officiate at a funeral Mass. Besides them being priests, no 2 of those Jesuits were alike, professionally or personally, except they always had my back. And during periods when we may have been disagreeing regarding logistical or programmatic issues, they were always there for me. And for that reason, that's yet another reason why the Jesuits will always be so important to me. I also greatly appreciated my strong working relationship developed over the years with our Board of Trustees, especially when it came to fundraising and physical plan issues. Ironically, 3 of the 8 chairmen of PrEP's Board of Trustees to date were students of mine. I cannot take credit for them going on to be chairman of Board of Trustees, but I remember them very well in class. They were a pleasure to have in class. And 2 of them in particular, Phil McGovern and Bill Ahern, became great friends and confidants and mentors, as did another board chair whom you heard from earlier, Jack Caulfield. One other board member who I just feel compelled to mention is my classmate and really great professional and personal friend, Vito Germanario, who came up from Washington to be with us today. For the past 3 decades, Vito has been a force for a change and positive impulse here at St. Peter's Prep, serving on our Board of Trustees for 4 3-year terms. Again, I just have to mention Vito's name because he is part of where Prep is going at this point. Pardon me on that. Looking back, it's always been a team effort. And I know with us today, are our architects and 3 alumni who have been absolutely indispensable to me and to Prep on the Master Planning Committee, Tom Lean, Tom McGinty, and Paul Schaetzle. And I mentioned Paul's name, even what he said about me earlier, about the length of my speech. And I'm almost done, by the way. So, in 2 days when I leave my office for the last time, I'll be thinking of that famous quote that says, "Today is the first day of the rest of your life." But as my fellow alumni can attest, the reality is that, at least in the abstract, you never really leave Prep, and Prep never really leaves you. Also, you all know that cliche that says, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, there's a certain young lady sitting over here who will quickly provide the opposing view, since on more than a few occasions, my Prep shoulder bag accompanied us to the Jersey Shore, the West Coast, and even to a number of European countries. It makes one wonder, in hindsight, if Pat now has any regrets about agreeing to dance with me in that building right over there back in 1968. But that's a conversation for another evening. In closing, my understanding is that as a retired employee, as of this Friday, I'll still be welcome at Prep events, and thus I hope to continue crossing paths with you and many other Prep friends throughout the years to come. And so, again, with my deepest and heartfelt thanks, thank you for being part of this celebration, for your role, large and small, in what is and what will continue to become this great school. Indeed, in so many ways, it will always be Prep for life. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm happy to say the bar remains open, and now I'm going to have a drink.
All right. Before I make a final presentation to Jim, and he left me just enough daylight to read, I would like to thank one more person. On behalf of the entire St. Peter's family, I'd like to thank Pat, Jim's wife. I'd like to thank Pat, right, for allowing Jim to share his heart with Prep. You've been along for the long run, the ultra marathon, and you've been there the entire way, from attending alumni events to watching Jim work while on vacation, to allowing your house to be overrun by notes for the 150th book. We always knew that no matter how much Jim loved Prep, Prep was a distant second to his love for you. And we have one final announcement. Jim, we thought about it, and what gift could we give you that would measure up to your incredible legacy? And the only answer was to make sure that that legacy continues. So in heartfelt recognition of your unwavering dedication and historic loyalty to your beloved alma mater, and as an enduring tribute to that inspiring legacy, a few of your biggest fans have recently secretly established the Patricia and James C. Horan Class of 70 Endowed Scholarship. Excellent. And please don't cash that before Monday. As Jim said, the bar is open. Please stay. I'm sure so many people still want to say goodbye or hello or we love you to Jim, so stay as long as you like.